Listen, everybody, do you know what's nice about having the income tax payday in April? The weather is just beginning to warm up as the IRS is just about to take the shirt off your back. Teacher, why weren't you in school yesterday? Boy, my mother took me to the cemetery. Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody dead? And the boy said, yeah, they all were. And one little girl said to another girl, you see this jewelry? Yes. Well, it once belonged to a millionaire. Really? Who? F.W. Woolworth. We are trying to give you some entertainment here as to the Glendora documentary number 3 as to what happened when Glendora was 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, and 51, and 52. And that would be in the years 1974, 1975. Can you remember what you were doing those years? 1976, 1977, 1978, 1979, and 1980. A prompt. Let's start with a prompt.
All right. Scarsdale School.
What, dear?
The schools.
No, honey. Turn the page over, would you?
Oh, okay.
Turn over a new leaf, would you?
All right. Harrison.
What was it, dear?
Harrison.
I'm sorry, I didn't get it.
Harrison.
Harrison.
Yes.
Is there only one page? Let's pause and see where we are. 1, 2. One of the properties that we had was Careers, Glendora Careers Unlimited. And Glendora would ask CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, many all located in the New York metropolitan market. And we would ask them, would you come on TV and tell a boy or a girl how to grow up to be the president of such and such a company, such as your company? Would you tell a boy or girl how to grow up to be president, for instance, of Quaker Oats, how to be a success in business? And the questions would be, where were you born? Where did you go to school? What were your first jobs? What is your job now, and what is your job like? And these CEOs, as busy as they were generous enough to drop everything and do that interview. It was about a 5-minute interview. Who were some of these CEOs? Well, the president of Time, Time, Life, Fortune, the president of Time, the president of HBO, the president of for the USA, president of Nestle, that's a Swiss company, and the second in command of Xerox, and the CEO of the Associated Press, all these top names. And Glendora had about 100 of these people that she had interviewed. And she made a list of them. And when she would ask somebody to be on the show, she would show them that impressive list. And apparently they would call up and see, well, is this woman all right? And apparently they got a positive answer. Now, one of the triumphs of this period was Glendora called up the president and CEO of Metropolitan Life. Now, the nice thing about living in Westchester is that that's where so many of the successful people of these companies lived. And she called him up, and she says, how would you like to go on the 6 p.m. news on WNBC TV and give a lovely Christmas message? It would cost $10,000. We would give you 10 ads, 30 seconds each. You would write the copy. You would write what you wanted to say. I would get it cleared by the TV station. We will video it in your office. Call me next week. Call me next weekend. This was at his home. So I'd call him next weekend and I'd go over it again. And I told him that the payment had to be up front because the only way I could come in at this low price was that I couldn't be spending my time collecting. I was a one-person operator doing all these things, and I had to spend my time doing that. So I called him and went over it again and told him that the payment had to be up front. And he said, call me next weekend. Well, I think the third or fourth time, he said, yes, I'll do it. And so we started working on what he would say. And then we bought the airtime, and we cleared his copy with WNBC TV, and we set a date to make this commercial. Well, I went to his office. His secretary was there, but he wasn't. He was behind closed doors. She says, I'm sorry, something has come up. But we waited. And he says, let's hope he'll be out in a little while. And we waited in his lush office at Madison Avenue and near 23rd Street. And we waited and we waited. Guess what was going on? Chernobyl. He was a director on the board of Union Carbide. Chernobyl had exploded, and those poor, unfortunate people. And they had to take care of him, Union Carbide. So he was in his private office with the rest of the members on the board by telephone, deciding how to solve this terrible happening. And while he was there, a man came in, and he was from the advertising agency, and they were very upset that they had been cheated out of $10,000. With that huge advertising budget, they were afraid to lose $10,000. He says, we want to help you. And I said, well, I really don't need any help. I have done this for so long. And he kept pushing and pushing, and I kept pushing him back. Finally, he went away. And poor President and CEO of MetLife came out, and even though he had this terrible thing in his mind, he sat down in the soft chair in his office. I set up the camera, and we made the commercial. And it was very nice how the people at MetLife was wishing the public a Merry Christmas. And it was interesting, previous to this arriving there for that interview, he drove in his limousine, or rather, he was driven in his limousine, in the MetLife underground parking, and we were told to do the underground parking. And he was about 50 yards from me. And when he saw our car, the 1980 Lincoln Continental Mark VI, he took off his glasses and he stared at us. Then he put back on his glasses and went upstairs. And then the rest you know. Now, it was one CEO after another, and they would come to our house, many of them. I would go to their offices, many of them, and I would always interview. My style of interviewing was I was always polite. I never asked any embarrassing questions, and there were always jokes, funny circumstances to what they would say, and it was very nice. And then in Manhattan, when I had to go to the interviews in Manhattan, I would carry a TV monitor that was this big and my Sony Portapac camera that was about this big, and I would carry them with a T-shirt over them because down the streets of Manhattan, they could have been usurped, if you know what I mean. So I had this humble T-shirt over them, and nobody knew that I was carrying them. And I would make the interview, and then I would play it back on the monitor for the person I interviewed, and they enjoyed that very much. Jeff Bulick was a young man in finance, a graduate of Yale University for HBO, and I was happy to see 10 years later that Jeff became president of Time, of Time Warner Television. And he was the one to say goodbye to Time Warner when it went out of business. Any prompts, honey?
Yeah. Let's see. The glasses in the parking lot?
Yep, I took care of that
Okay.
one, thank you.
9th grade.
What was that?
9th grade.
Oh, what was fascinating about that? When I was in 9th grade, just 13 years old or so, I would see brochures, little history pamphlets that had been put out by Metropolitan Life and given to the schools free. And I would see that address, something, Madison Avenue, New York, New York. And do you think that I would ever grow up to interview the president and CEO? Wasn't that something, folks?
Beautiful apartment.
Oh, we had a beautiful apartment in Harrison, New York, way up on a ridge. In fact, it was so much on a ridge that years ago they had a ski jump there.
Water towers.
What was that?
Water towers.
Oh, the water towers. 3 water towers were there from Harrison, New York. And in the Harrison radio TV station, folks, there was a little statue, not much, not very big, of Amelia Earhart. Now, Amelia Earhart lived in Rye. I never could understand why Harrison claimed her, because she definitely lived in Rye. Rye and Harrison are juxtaposed, but Amelia Earhart did have a house in Rye. Later, it burned down. It was a very sad thing. While she was alive, it burned down, and they never went back to Rye.
Franklin with me.
Franklin was always with me, honey. He always was with me. He went wherever I went, and he was there. And people noticed that and respected that.
Gannett.
Oh, and he worked for Gannett. He helped them with subscribers to the Gannett newspaper, and he did very well until he seemed to run out of steam. But to this day, I have a pension that comes in that Franklin earned $38 a month, and I treasure that. Gannett newspapers.
Care.
Who?
Care. Kair. Care.
I don't get that.
Care. Kair. Care, the name. It's somebody's name. Care.
Okie dokie, let's pause and see if I can figure that out. That was Martha Kerr. She was a Christian Scientist, and she manned womaned the reading room in White Plains. A very fine person. What else do you have?
Dan Rather?
Yes, I went to CBS quite often. I went to NBC quite often, doing business, buying their airtime and getting copy cleared. And I watched Dan Rather talking to a man in the lobby of CBS down on 57th Street, around 11th and 12th Avenue. It was interesting to watch him and see what he was like off the air.
Astronaut school teacher.
Now listen, folks. I had a joke about a high school teacher in one of the commercials. And it happened at the very time that the dear high school teacher from New Hampshire was killed in the spaceship. You remember that? Well, we couldn't have that go on the air. So I ran down to CBS from White Plains and got a hold of the people as fast as I could. And I had to wait for them, but I wouldn't leave until they took that commercial out and I substituted another one. Wouldn't that have been terrible if that had gone on the air?
Oh, yes. 2 intake.
I'm sorry about that. What is that?
It says 2 intake. 2 in a tape.
Oh, 2-inch tape.
Yes.
Folks, videotape in those days was 2 inches, and the commercials were on 2 inches, and they were on little boxes like this. And then they changed to 1 inch, and then you had to go from one format to another. You were always going from one format to another. Then you had to take them from 1 inch down to half-inch reel-to-reel VHS, not reel-to-reel, half-inch cassettes VHS. Okay, honey.
CBS Engineering.
Oh, I interviewed the CBS engineers at a time when CBS was trying to beat RCA on color TV. And I really felt sorry for CBS because they lost and they spent so much money on it.
Public TV.
And I went to public TV and interviewed the big bosses up there. And they were up a couple streets up from CBS.
Steve Hewitt.
What was that, dear?
Steve Hewitt. The person.
Steve Hewitt.
Yes.
Steve Hewitt was the son of Don Hewitt, who was the brains behind 60 Minutes. I called up Steve Hewitt one day. I called CBS switchboard and asked for Steve Hewitt, and they connected me. And I said, why did the inventor cross a microwave oven with a TV set? I don't know why. So he could watch 60 Minutes in a quarter of an hour. Well, I imagine he used that 1,000 times, don't you? And did I ever tell you folks that I would call Sulzberger, who was the owner of the New York Times? I don't know why. Why would I sit down at the telephone and call the New York Times? But I did. Switchboard answered New York Times. I said, Mr. Sulzberger, please. And they connected me right away. And I said, Mr. Sulzberger, I have a joke for you. I told the joke. He laughed heartily. He says, I'll tell that to my son. And I said something about good cheer and goodbye. And then I used to call him every month after that. The owner of the New York Times. Which Sulzberger, wherever one was there in that year. And I bought an ad on the New York Times. I bought a full-page ad on the New York Times. that said you can have 10 spots on the 6 p.m. news channel 4, New York, for $10,000, including the videotaping. You know what that costs? You want to guess? Steph, do you want to guess?
Did it cost $1,000?
Good for you, Steph. 10 times that.
Wow, 10.
Exactly.
Wow.
And that wouldn't be the New York Times nationally. That would be the New York Times in our Northeast.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. House could not afford furniture.
Well, the people who lived in Scarsdale, many of them were so anxious to live in Scarsdale because it had the name of being a very rich community. But the Scarsdale schools were highly esteemed. But, they would buy the house, and it would take all their money to buy the house, and they couldn't afford furniture in it. I went to one house after another where it was bare practically.
Harvard Club.
Oh, yes. One of the men who was in charge of a mutual fund and went to the Scarsdale Congregational Church, where I went, he became... he was amiable, sociable, congenial. He and his wife, Betty, and he took me to the Harvard Club. Great distinction. And I was at the Scarsdale Country Club, which of course very fashionable, loads of money, and they had an FBI speaker, a man from the FBI. And you know what that FBI man said? He said, the thing that interferes with our work the most is the civil rights. What else do we have there?
A snowstorm.
Oh, we came down. I would go back and forth to Buffalo, to New York, Westchester County, and we started out in Buffalo, and this awful ice storm came up. And it snowed, and it snowed, and it snowed, and then it turned to ice, and it turned to ice, and we took the back road. We didn't take the throughway. We went way back down through Binghamton and all that. And by the time we got about mid-state, the 1980 Lincoln was encased in ice. I mean that. It was encased in ice. Was I ever happy as we got closer to the Binghamton and the weather warmed up and that ice melted?
Oh, I bet. All right. Let's see.
Okay.
Let me just pause.
And what are we going to talk about next that we can't read?
Harrison Town Hall.
Oh, the Harrison Town Hall. That was really something. It was on the Hutchinson River Parkway. And guess whom they ensnared? David Letterman, going 90 miles an hour. David Letterman lived over on Route 7 near Darien, Connecticut. Not Danbury, Connecticut. Darien. And David Letterman would tape Late Night with Dead or Right.
2 o'clock p.m. 77.5 degrees Fahrenheit.
Late Night with David Letterman. He would tape that around 7 o'clock at night. And then he would rush up the Hutchinson River Parkway to get on to 684 and get on to Route 7, I think it was. And then that's where he lived, and they caught him going 90 miles an hour up the Hutchinson River Parkway. So I wanted to hear his trial, and I went the day when I knew what was going to be called. But, of course, his lawyer showed up. He didn't have to show up. That's an awful thing, I think, in the courts, that the defendant doesn't have to show up. He can be covered up by the lawyer. And so I miss seeing David Letterman on trial. But I watched them hand out the fines for the speeding ticket. There were about 30 people lined up. Okay, $500. Okay, $1,000. Okay, $200. And I counted up the money that they took in that court period in the morning to be about $40,000. And that was every day of the week. Okay, Harrison, what's next?
Lincoln and chauffeurs.
So many, the highways were filled with Lincolns and chauffeurs. And all the executives, the CEOs, were sitting in the back seat, and they all had these lights so that they could read. And these CEOs are working away on their way to and from work. And they would see them going by at 7 o'clock at night. You would see them coming in the morning at 6.